Welcome to another Co-op Conversations podcast episode. Each episode features different guests living in housing cooperatives in various parts of the world. Through these conversations, you'll learn more about life in a housing cooperative for children, teenagers, parents, and seniors. In one episode, we take a slightly different approach and we talk to Brenda Torpy from Burlington, Vermont, who is a longtime champion of the community land trust model, a land ownership model that some housing co-ops also use. I'm Julie Lapalme, Secretary General of Cooperative Housing International, or CHI. I deliver CHI's work program, which includes communications, education, and knowledge sharing, governance, and collaborations. Cooperative Housing International is one of the sectoral organizations of the International Cooperative Alliance, which is the global apex body representing all cooperatives. CHI raises awareness about cooperative housing by promoting its successes on a global level. We also facilitate networking opportunities via knowledge sharing events. If you go to our first podcast episode, we explain housing cooperatives. If you want to learn more about the different types of housing cooperatives or find out more about the work we do, please head over to our website at housinginternational.coop. So we have with us today Brel Hutton-Okpalaeke, who is Director of Development for NASCO, which is the North American Students for Cooperation, a network of student co-ops across the US and Canada that is educating and organizing an emerging generation of cooperators. Brel also lives in a housing co-op in Madison, Wisconsin, with their partner, Wyla, and their young baby, Isra. So welcome, Brel, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Julie.
So can you tell me a little bit about your co-op that you live in? It's a little different than what most people understand a housing co-op to be. So you live in a shared house with other people where there's a kitchen, living room, and some bedrooms, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So can you set the scene for our listeners and tell them a little bit more about how your housing co-op is set up?
Yeah, so we have 8 rooms in a shared building, and we have a shared kitchen and living spaces, as well as a garden, a greenhouse, and several other amenities available in the building. The house has in those rooms, they're usually like double rooms or 2 rooms attached to each other. Most of them are kind of suites. That's the one that we have right now. And so we have kind of like one room within our room section that serves as like a living room, and one that serves as our bedroom. The spaces range in size between single rooms and those like larger suites. But we all have kind of then shared access to the shared amenities.
And how many are you living in the house?
Right now we're 9 adults and 1 child, who you can hear in the background.
Okay, so you're in Wisconsin. So what part of, or in Madison? So what part of town are you in? What kind of amenities are near the housing co-op?
Yeah, so we're in kind of a mostly single family zoned housing area on the east side of Madison, Atwood, Starkweather, Yahara neighborhood. And we have nearby, elementary school and middle school within walking distance. We have a small park. We have the Old Brick Gardens very near to us. And just down the street, we have a larger new cooperative housing development. We're one independent co-op of about 23 other cooperative organizations in Madison.
So is this new co-op that's going up, is it affiliated with your organization?
No, it's not affiliated with us. It's has just started last year, and really is like mostly off the ground and is operating now.
Okay. Are there many housing co-ops in Madison?
Yeah, I believe there are 23 housing cooperative organizations, and then one of them has 12 buildings currently.
Oh, that's quite large then.
So there's a lot of like housing co-ops in Madison.
Nice. So most people are used to a nuclear family setup. So can you elaborate on how you're raising a baby in a shared household? How is that being handled?
Well, it's been really helpful. To have a lot of other people who are able to support us while this happens. We definitely had the goal of sharing space with Azraya initially, and like continue to do so. So it's really nice to have not just Lila and I being the only adults that Azraya gets a chance to meet. They will spend pretty significant time with a lot of the other adults in the house. And have gotten a chance to really get to know them as other safe individuals that they can grow up next to.
And is this the first time there's a child growing up in your co-op?
No, this co-op's been pretty child friendly since its inception. We had one member who just moved out this last month who raised his daughter here, and they lived here for 15 years. And this was an experience where he was able to have the whole gamut, from tiny child all the way up to young woman who's moving out and going to college. We also, just before we moved in, had a couple who had two very young children in the space as well. So it's pretty normalized to have children in the co-op, and it's been really nice to have the organizational and personal support.
So what kind of organizational and personal support are you getting?
So the personal support's been really nice to have, just individuals who knew that we were coming in. We had Ezra here at the house, so they knew that was kind of coming, and planned for that. And we're really open to allowing, not just allowing a child to be here, but they were excited to have a little baby in the house. And so we've had other housemates sometimes help us clean up after ourselves in the kitchen when we're new parents and dealing with all of the things that come along with that. We've had our housemates hold the baby while we're going to go and do whatever kind of small things that we would find ourselves that we needed to do. And then kind of more structurally, the house has been really considerate in adjusting our house meeting times and our scheduling to allow for us to be able to put the baby to bed at a reasonable hour, to allow for us to participate from our room sometimes, and just kind of call into the house meeting, even though we're in the same building, while we're trying to get the baby to go to sleep. Those kinds of things have been really supportive of making it a really welcoming space for us to be able to still engage in. So
does your co-op have any kind of policy in place, or any kind of rules on how many, how do you go about deciding whether someone who is expecting a child or has a child, whether there's space in a co-op, or just how is that decision made?
So we don't have a policy on that, primarily because we want to avoid any of the steering considerations that come with the United States Fair Housing Act. We actually would be prevented from telling a family with a child, well, you can get this double room, but not the single room, because we've reserved the single room for a single person. We recognize that it's important to leave it up to the family with children to make the determination as to whether or not the rooms that are available are acceptable to them. So when a member comes into this co-op, if there's an opening, they're eligible for any of the openings, and they'll negotiate if there are multiple openings, they'll negotiate with the other people who are also moving in to decide what rooms fit their needs best. But we don't have a hard and fast we'll direct a family to one specific unit.
And is there a selection process when someone wants to move into the co-op? Is there an interview? How do you select people who want to move in?
Yeah, we have an interview process in which we have kind of a written interview that people have, and then we have 3 meetings with a prospective member where the member also answers some standardized questions during those meetings. But also we explicitly say that part of this is we're going to live with you. We need to be able to informally and formally communicate with you in order for this cooperative to work. Are we able to do that? And so that time that we have with folks in those interviews serves as that space. It also serves as a space for the prospective applicant to get a sense of who they'd be living with, and whether or not they feel comfortable communicating formally and informally with us. So that's kind of the process. And then once whoever is in the pool of applicants who's applied to have one of the spaces here, once everyone's gone through that interview and application process, we as the cooperative then decide based on those questions and those interviews whether or not we're going to accept a member. And we kind of do one more, like kind of one better than the bare minimum, where we explicitly state that we'll tell any applicant why they were decided, like why we accepted them or why we did not accept them, because we find it extremely important to avoid discrimination based on any of the protected classes that are there.
Mm-hmm. So what would, do you have any examples, like without pointing at anyone in particular, of like why you wouldn't accept someone? Like, is it because like they just wouldn't be a good fit, or does it go deeper than that?
Well, we'd be more specific, I think, than just saying you wouldn't be a good fit, because that could be really easily interpreted as
anything.
Well, why are you a good fit? Tell me more. So we would really focus on, do you demonstrate like a strong commitment to completing the tasks that are required of you as a member? Do you bring necessary skills to the co-op that we didn't have before? Were you rude to our members during your informal interview? Like, we wanted to be like much more specific in those things, so that we are able to give an explicit reason that is not discriminatory.
Right. Okay. And so let's talk about governance. Is everyone, like, is every member involved in the governance, or is there like a board of representatives? How do you do the governance?
So our co-op is really small, right? So we're 9 people. So we technically have a separate board in order to be in compliance with Wisconsin incorporation statutes. We do elect officers. We do have them sit on the board, but in our organizing documents, we explicitly delegate all powers and authorities of the board to the membership of the corporation. And so the 9 members of the House are able to make decisions for the organization. So all members who have a contract with Yahara Cooperative Land Trust, the co-op that we're in, are able to take part in governance.
Okay, cool. So how do you distribute the chores, the cleaning and the cooking? Does everyone like have a specific role to play, or do you have a rota? How do you deal with that?
So we have some of the like administrative tasks that are specifically assigned to individual members, like making sure that we have a budget and that our bills are paid, and making sure that we're keeping on top of the maintenance requirements of the building. But then with cleaning tasks, we have like a list of different tasks, and people take them as they are able to. And then we trade off those tasks as people need to. We just make sure that the list is full and has names next to everything, to make sure that the tasks that we have from the house are covered. And we try to be flexible to recognize people's different abilities and time constraints. But we also try to balance that with making sure that everyone is contributing in some way. And so that being really clear and out front helps to serve some of the accountability.
So are there times when people aren't fulfilling their tasks and you have to kind of bring it up, or like how do you deal with with folks that are maybe not pulling their weight or not doing what they said they were going to do?
In the time that I've been here, we've been pretty lucky that everyone has been pretty well committed to doing the tasks that they've taken plus more. We do have a system that we implemented in which if someone was not doing their required work, that we would bring it up in a house meeting, and that and if they were to like continue to not do so, that it would eventually be potentially like grounds for removal from the co-op if they were to just completely walk off and not do anything. But we first and foremost talk with the members and then bring things up in meetings if talking to them is just kind of one-on-one informally was insufficient.
Okay. And how long have you been living there, Brel?
I've been living in this cooperative since May of last year, but I've lived in quite a few similar co-ops going back quite a few years now.
And what made you decide to move to this housing co-op?
I moved to this housing co-op partially because of the neighborhood, which was, I was living downtown in Madison, which is kind of unfortunately not quite as child friendly as one would want. It's right, like downtown is right next to the university. And so you get a bunch of students being, loud and sometimes dangerous for kids. The other reason was cost. This co-op was a little bit cheaper than the co-op I was living in downtown. And the other was space and access to space in the co-op. I have in this co-op, I have a larger individual unit. So for me to be living here with our child and my partner, it makes it a lot easier for me to fit in the space.
And I imagine you're working from home as well. Is everyone working from home in the co-op, or is it a mixture?
Yeah, it's a mix. We're mostly working from home, but we have 3 members who aren't. We've got someone who's working at the public library, a person who's working with the university, and a person who is working at a local bike shop. So there's different exposure levels, and one of them is in a lab, and it's pretty safe. Folks are adhering to all proper protective equipment expectations and requirements. Our member who's working at the library, the library has put in a lot of pretty significant restrictions on spacing and such. And our member who's at the bike shop, it's the same kind of situation. So we had to implement kind of a COVID safety policy in the house, and with that came some disclosures from each of us about what our risk factors were, like where we were going and whether or not we were going to be putting people at risk by engaging in certain activities. And we were pretty clear about setting those guidelines. The co-op was pretty clear about doing that when we moved in. And I'm really thankful for it. And I'm thankful for us, for our kind of system of checking in on whether or not that system itself is working properly, because that's really helped us to keep it so that no one in the house since they've been here has been exposed, and hasn't really put any of us at risk, considering we're all sharing space.
So you haven't had any COVID scares at all since like a year, really? Well, you said you moved in May, so not quite a year.
Right. Yeah. But even during that time, we did, before we moved in, we had a few people move out because they didn't feel that they were going to be able to comply with the COVID expectations in the space, which I think is, it's reasonable. People talked about it. There may have been other reasons as well, but that was definitely a cited reason. And we've stuck to those expectations and that communication since. So yeah, we haven't had any significant COVID scares. If we did, or if we had a member who felt like they were potentially in a risky situation, they would separate themselves from the rest of the house, and they would kind of quarantine for a few days, which we definitely did a couple of times for a couple of folks. And during that time, we would try and support them by making it easier for them to access the spaces that were common at times when the rest of us weren't going to be there, or we would wear N95 masks in the common spaces, and just made sure that we were cognizant of our contact. So
do you wear masks on a regular basis when you're in common spaces, or just when someone might have been exposed or there was some kind of risk?
We've worn masks in common spaces as a matter of course during COVID. I will say that's like definitely one difference between co-op living and maybe like living by yourself. So putting on a mask to sit in the living room and talk with folks was a little different, but it was not a unreasonable hurdle to get over. And I think has really made sure that things are fine for us, even though we haven't had, a member come in and expose us all. I think that's been good practice for us.
It's funny. I can see the mask hanging from the lamp behind you there, and
oh yeah,
like masks have become the new decor in a lot of places.
Yeah,
you see masks hanging from people's rear view mirrors in their cars, and just masks everywhere.
Yeah, it definitely is the case. Yeah, we also noted some other things too. Like we have forced air heating, and we were aware of another cooperative in Madison that kind of ran into some issues where they had forced air heating, and a forced air heating return and blowing the air around may or may not have been a contributing factor to them kind of having a spreader event at that cooperative. But by and large, I don't think any of the other co-ops in Madison have had any significant events.
So are there activities that you don't do, or that are, that as a group you've decided, like if you are going into, you're going grocery shopping, or I don't know, like you're going to some kind of, grocery shopping, I'm sure that's part of, just everyday life. But if you do an activity that's a little bit riskier or unusual, like how do you deal with that? Like, do you disclose that to the rest of the group, or like have you just are there certain things that the household has decided, like definitely like no traveling, for example, or like have you made any of those choices, or you're just kind of dealing with case by case situation?
Well, we've set norms around about normal activities, like going to the grocery store. Like we expect whoever went to the grocery store to have worn a mask and washed their hands when they came back from the grocery store. We think that that's pretty normal. We're now more and more aware of how COVID is spread, and so I think we're pretty comfortable with our grocery shopper going and doing that. We also have a shared food plan, so we have like a person who is doing all the grocery shopping. So it's kind of more single point of contact. Or actually, it's not a single person; it's a group of people who are doing that right now. But if a member were to say that they wanted to visit their grandmother, or right now we have a member who is traveling, and that's not a normal activity. They're doing interstate travel, and so our decision was that when they come back, they're going to quarantine for the requisite period, and they're going to get a test once they've been back and quarantined for a couple of days, to just ensure that we know what our risk factors are going to be, and that they are aware of kind of like what our expectations are. And we set that up ahead of time.
So when someone is quarantining, are you cooking for them? Is someone taking over their tasks and their responsibilities for the quarantine period of time?
It will depend on the tasks that they're doing. If they have to just, if they're doing our finances, like they could usually do that from the room. But like when they're quarantining, yes, we'll help them get food if that's necessary. If they want to use the kitchen, they still can, but we ask that they let us know that they're going to do that, give us a little heads up so that people can be out of the kitchen space, and then let them use it, and then let us know when they're done, and that they clean up after themselves. So we've figured out kind of workarounds to make their non-contact a little bit more feasible in a space like this.
Yeah, so that they're not like stuck in their room for 2 weeks without
right.
Setting foot outside. So you were mentioning that there's a few people that are going grocery shopping. So I imagine that then there's another smaller group that does the cooking, and so how do you do the meal times?
We have fewer meals than I think most co-op organizations in Madison do. We have just a single weekly shared meal that we normally have.
Oh, okay.
And then we just rotate through the people who are here in the house who will cook that meal. We try to have kind of house meeting and or discussion time at that same meal time in order to kind of keep us grounded in the collective effort that is operating and making this community. But we also recognize it's COVID. And so eating all in the same room is kind of not really the best way for us to establish reasonable social distancing. So we're fortunate to have a larger like living room, dining room, kitchen open space. And so people can separate themselves apart from each other if they want to eat in eyeshot of each other, or they'll eat separately and like we'll come back in and talk with folks while they're masked in the space.
Okay. So you mentioned that there was quite a few other housing co-ops in Madison. Are you part of a network? Are you connected with those co-ops?
We're not part of a formal network with those co-ops. We're aware of them. A large number of the members of this co-op have lived in other co-ops in Madison, but we're not formally affiliated with them.
Okay. So let's talk about your work with NASCO, the North American Students for Cooperation. So you work in development, helping co-ops in expanding and other real estate projects. So tell us a little bit about your work.
Yeah, so NASCO focuses on group equity cooperative housing. So that's housing co-ops where the members have a voting stake, but they don't have an equity share in the co-op, and that all of the equity is held by the co-op organization itself. This is a little bit different than the market rate or limited equity co-ops that folks will see. And we partner with other organizations that support those co-ops. We focus on group equity. We have member co-op organizations. So we're a membership organization of individual co-ops, and those co-ops are in the United States and Canada, and they collectively have over 4,000 individual human members and that are members of NASCO. And we provide training for those co-ops. We provide technical assistance for them if they're trying to redo their finances or do a development project. And we have an annual conference that we provide for our members. And this past year, we just kicked off a leadership program where we're taking a cohort of individual members from co-ops and training them on cooperative leadership principles and practices that they'll be able to then bring back to their home co-ops after this year-long program. And we're really excited to do that. My role with NASCO is I'm our Director of Development Services. So I focus on real estate development and acquisition, as well as any kind of major like refinances or significant work that either improves the co-ops physically, improves their standing financially, or stabilizes them so that they'll be able to develop in the future.
And just to clarify, so NASCO's members, are they all student housing co-ops, or are there some non-student housing co-ops that are members as well?
They're a mix of student housing co-ops and non-student housing co-ops. By population, they're about 50-50 students and non-students that are members of NASCO. But the actual co-op organizations, there are more organizations that are not student specific than there are student specific organizations that are members of NASCO.
Oh, I see. Okay. So the member co-ops are, so when they're like refinancing or wanting to develop, so they come to you for technical advice. So like in terms of refinancing, like, are you dealing with specific, like finance co-ops or credit unions, or is each individual co-op dealing with their own, with their own financial institution?
That'll depend kind of on the project. So like if a co-op's trying to refinance, it may be most larger, well-established cooperative organizations can kind of refinance by themselves. They're usually perfectly capable of doing that without technical assistance. However, some co-op organizations either were set up at one point and now have all new membership, or had been set up under some kind of complex financial scheme that the initial incorporators figured out, and now they're at their 5-year balloon time and they need to figure out what to do really quickly. And maybe the members like never engaged in cooperative finance before and they don't know what's going on. That's kind of where we best fit in. And we try to work with cooperative community development financial institutions. So either like our CDFIs or credit unions or nonprofit lending institutions that will be able to support our co-op members long term, because it can be really hard to get financing for a co-op through traditional channels. A lot of lending institutions don't understand what you're setting up, and especially in the group equities where they'll ask, but who actually runs this corporation? Is it the renters? Like how do you have controls in this situation? So often lenders will just kind of out of hand say, nah, go somewhere else because it doesn't fit in our boxes. And we've worked pretty hard to develop relationships with a lot of other lending institutions that help streamline that process for our members and for our potential members.
And does NASCO own any property or like any equity in any housing co-ops, or it's strictly like a member-based organization?
Nasco Properties does own buildings, and that operates kind of like a co-op of co-ops, where an individual co-op organization in say Texas that owns 2 buildings can join Nasco Properties, and by joining Nasco Properties then owns the equity in the building and also owns buildings in Lawrence, Kansas, and so now can kind of equity balance between those 2 organizations if one of them has a major capital expense, or if one of them wants to develop, they can borrow against the equity in the other organizations. And so that's been a really powerful vehicle for NASCO to be able to do co-op housing development.
So how many holdings does the NASCO Properties have?
I believe we're at 16 right now. Just swapped a building in Providence for 2 buildings in Providence. So yeah.
And is your housing co-op like an entity of its own, or I think you mentioned earlier that it was part of a community land trust?
The co-op that I live in is an entity by itself. It is called Yahara Cooperative Land Trust, but as after I had moved in, I realized that the way that this had been incorporated was and the way that we'd been operating the co-op were not really aligned. The original organization was designed to be actually a cooperative land trust. Since 1973, it's just held this one and hasn't really done anything with that. So we've spent a bunch of time in the past couple of months kind of changing some of our policies to allow for us to potentially own more properties. But I think since 1973, the members' turnover kind of missed that.
They went out of line with what kind of the original multi-house intent was.
Oh, okay. So are there plans to eventually down the road to look at expanding and buying more properties or some more land?
There aren't specific plans right now for YCLT to purchase an additional building. I think right now we're just kind of getting our ducks in a row to prepare for something like that, and to prepare for the organization to be able to meet its capital needs longer term. But we're keeping our eyes open. I'm keeping my eyes open because I think that it would be really great for us to be able to have a wider footprint of permanently affordable housing in Madison.
Mm-hmm. And you use the equity in your current property to leverage financing and provide more affordable housing. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So I think that pretty much covers everything. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with us about living in Yahara
Cooperative Land Trust? Yeah.
And what does that mean?
Yahara. So there's a river right near us, which is the Yahara River, and so we're in that neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So nice to be near the Yahara River.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, if there's any so you've been there for not quite a year. What how has it been? Since May of 2020 to live in your housing co-op for you and your partner and your baby. What does your baby think?
As far as I can tell, they seem to like it. They really enjoy wandering around and having a much larger space than I think they otherwise would have, and a lot more to look at. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the sense of scale really matters too much, but our individual room unit is about $400 per month US, and we have access to the rest of the house. So there's common spaces on the first, second, and third floors of the house. We have a greenhouse. We have a backyard. We're, in a pretty nice neighborhood. And we get every Sunday, somebody makes us dinner. So
pretty good deal.
It's a pretty solid deal. Yeah. And so I think they're going to have a really good opportunity to learn so much from all of the other people that are going to be with them, and to see so much that they, I think, really wouldn't get a chance to see if they were kind of just living with us in a studio apartment or something.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine you've had to baby-proof the house somewhat. You have baby gates on all the stairs, or how?
Not yet. They're still immobile, but the baby gates are coming.
Yeah. You'll be busy with the screwdriver putting those in.
Yeah, and the house has had babies before, so it's it's nice that we're aware of where to put the stuff.
You can see the holes in the wood already.
Pretty much, yeah. Nice,
yeah. Well, thanks, Brel, for joining us today and taking some time out of your busy schedule, I'm sure, and creating, painting a picture of living in Yahara Housing Co-op in Madison. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Have a great day, and good luck with everything, and happy parenting in the co-op.
I really appreciate taking the time.
Thank you for listening to this latest episode of Co-op Conversations. We hope that it provided a better understanding of what life is like in a housing co-op. If you're interested in finding out more, you can visit us at housinginternational.coop. We feature many stories and resources on our website with useful tools, studies, and articles on topics ranging from governance to finance to sustainability and so on. You can also find us on social media, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, where we like to share stories and good practices of co-op housing around the world. If you want to find a housing co-op in your region, I suggest that you do an online search for co-op housing along with the name of your city, and hopefully something will come up. I would like to thank all of our guests for sharing their stories with us. I would also like to thank our sound technician, Todd LeBlanc, who also lives in a housing co-op in Vancouver, Canada. Thanks for listening.